In this tutorial, we'll be going over the process of using your CNC in conjunction with your laser to create Vectric's version of a carpentry square. We will start with a set of pre-made vectors and walk through creating toolpaths for the areas that will be engraved or etched with your laser. Then we'll develop tooling that will be used to cut the part out with a traditional CNC cutting tool. Now, this is where we're actually heading, and this will be the final product, but to get started, let's pop up to File and Close. Okay, so let's open up that existing file. So let's come up to open an existing file, and we're going to choose in our tutorials folder the VSquare CRV file. We're just going to open that up, and there we go. You can see we're now presented with our VSquare. Now right away you can see we've got our vector logo in the middle there, and we're going to etch that out using the laser. Same with the grays that we've got along here. We're going to etch these out using the laser as well. But we've also got some traditional toolpaths that we're going to use with some traditional tool cutting down here when we come to actually place the VSquare in this holder that we have as well. Now let's take a quick look at our job setup. So as you can see, we've got a single-sided job with a job size of 8 inches wide, 8 inches high, and 0.19 inches thick. And of course, our units are also in inches. Our Z0 position is off of the material surface, and our XY datum position is in the bottom left-hand corner. And that looks good to me, so we're just going to hit OK. Now, we are going to have a look at our Layers tab. So if we pop over to Layers, you'll notice that we've got different vectors placed under different layers. And that just makes it easy for us when it comes to toolpath anything. It just makes it easier for us to select the right vectors for the right toolpath. So you'll notice we have our logo in blue here, which is represented just here in the middle. We have our grids represented by the black vectors around the edge here. And finally, we have our cutout, which is represented in green. You can see the green line just here and around our base here that we can actually place our VSquare into. If you notice this bottom bit here, you can actually pop that into this slot here, so you can hold it up and you can put it standing up, and it'll look quite nice on a desk. And you'll also notice that we've got a little notch here, and you can actually use that to place a nail on, and you can accurately measure some angles. You'll also notice that we have accurate inch measurements across the top here, so if you want to measure anything in inches. And we also have this section here, which if used in conjunction with the foot here as a guide, it will help you to draw straight lines. Okay, so let's have a look at how we're going to start developing tooling for this square. But before we do that, I'll also just go back up to our drawing tab. And just so you're aware, you can also check your layers from the top here. So if you ever want to see the layer information, you can always pop over to the left, or you can pop up to the top here, and it'll be ready for you. So with our layers now covered, we can now have a look at the toolpath menu. So let's pop over to that by clicking this button just here to switch the toolpath commands. And now you'll see that you have these two new toolpaths here. You've got laser cut and fill, and you've got laser picture. Now, we won't be going into the laser picture in this tutorial, but I'll leave a link in the description below for you, so you can have a look at another great tutorial that does go over the laser picture in some great depth, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But for now, we're going to look at this one just here, the laser cut and fill. So let's open that one up. So this is the laser cut and fill form, and we're going to go through this really quickly, but we'll go into further detail later. We're going to look at some toolpathing. But the first thing you'll see is the tool option. This is where you can actually select a tool. So you can choose the tool to use that we're going to use to cut with our laser into our particular material. Then you can see we have some of the three most common settings that we have for power, the move speed, and the number of passes. And this allows you to quickly edit these on the fly. So if you want to edit these without going into too much detail with the other parts of your tool here, you could just edit your power, your move speed, and your number of passes just here as well. And then you've got a couple of options for your laser cut and fill. You've got to cut outside or right, cut inside and left, cut on, and to hatch film. And you've also got the offset option just here as well. We've also got some further settings that apply to our laser cut and fill here, which will interact with these settings just here. And as you can see, we can name our toolpath here. We can also save it directly from here as well. We can actually choose a post processor we want to, right from this menu. And we can also choose to output it directly to machine using VTransfer. and we can save a toolpath here, and actually we can calculate it all here as well. So it's quite a good and powerful form we have here. But for now, we can close this out because we're going to go into further detail a little bit later on. Now the first toolpath we're actually going to look at is a laser toolpath. And I want to run it across here, and I want to get all these grades toolpath with my laser. Now, instead of having to manually select all of these vectors individually, what I can do is just pop up to my layers tab, right click on grades, and I can just choose this option here to select layer vectors. Now, as you can see, they've all turned pink, and that's because they're all selected. And this is actually quite a powerful tool, because instead of me having to go around and manually select all of these vectors one by one, I can just select the lot on that particular layer. And that's why setting up your layers is so important and very helpful. But you've also got some great tools in the software to help you when it comes to toolpathing. So with that said, we're going to use the toolpath that we were just looking at, which is the laser cut and fill. So let's click on that and have a look at setting up our toolpaths. Now, the first thing we want to do when setting up our toolpath is looking at the tool. So if we pop over to the top here and click on select tool, you'll notice that we're presented with only laser tools, because this is a laser toolpath. So you'll only see laser tools in this toolpath. Now, currently, these settings are for craft foam black. Now what you'll notice is if you go up to the top here where it says material, you can click on this drop down menu and you can change the material. So perhaps you're using corrugated cardboard, and you'll see that the settings for my laser have changed accordingly because it's taken into account the material. Similarly, if I change it back to craft foam black, it will change the settings here as well to adjust for the color. So these settings will change depending on the material that you're using. But in our example, we're going to use plywood. So let's come down to plywood and let's click on that. And again, you'll see these are the settings now that I've got for my plywood. Now you'll notice here that we have two different sets of settings here and a third one that hasn't been defined yet. But if I click on this one here, you can see it's called mark, and that's used for marking, and you've got one for picture. And if you notice, if I go back and forth, if you notice these values just here, where I'm hovering my mouse pointer for the cutting parameters, feeds and speeds, and tool number, they're actually changing depending on if I choose picture or if I choose mark. Now, you can see some of the settings over here. The first thing you can see is the actual name of that tool. Now, this name has actually been automatically created by some of the settings that are down here. And if you want to see how that's done, you can come up here and click on this notepad looking button, and you'll see that it's actually made up of a set of variables that you can see over here. Now, if you want to see how these are actually defined, if you click in here and right click, you can see some of the variables here, and you can choose some of these variables here. So you can see there you've got cutting parameters, you've got feeds and speeds, material, machine as well. And these have all been taken into account here. So you see in this case, we've got tool type, max power, kerf, units, and then we've put a bit of custom text at the end here called mark. So that could be mark, picture, could be cut, for example. But for this case, it's mark. But that's just a quick overview of the name and how it is decided upon. So let's just cancel that for the moment. Now you see back in this form that you have a section to adding notes that you would like to add. You have the option to change the tool type there, but in this case, we've only got the one, which is a laser cutter. We've got our units here, millimeter or inches. And we've got our max power for our laser, in this case is 3.8 watts. And then below that we have our cutting parameters. And the first one you're going to see is the kerf. Now, the kerf is the width of material that is removed by your laser. And this is dependent on the material that you're engraving or cutting. For example, the kerf will be different when you're using the same power setting for paper as wood, seeing as paper should burn faster than wood. And also the kerf will be different depending on the thickness of the material that you want to cut all the way through. Many laser manufacturers will have the different kerf numbers for different materials available as a starting point for you, but a bit of trial and error should also get you the proper number that you are looking for, or the number of passes that you're looking for. Now, under that, as I just mentioned, you have the number of passes just here as well. Now, you may choose to ask the software to make several passes of your laser to get the desired result. For example, to cut through a material may take more passes than just to etch or burn the surface. Then we have our feeds and speeds, and you've got your power here, which is actually a percentage of the full power that you would like to use when you're running this toolpath. Now, this may be different on how dark or deep you want your engraving to be on each path. And then, of course, under that, you've got your feed unit. So you've got your millimeter inches, and you can change this to be the appropriate feed unit for your settings. Then under that, you've got the move speed. Now, the move speed specifies the speed that your machine will move during the cutting or engraving moves, and you may need to vary this to reduce burning or melting of your material. The maximum burn rate is used used by our software to simulate the burn effect that you will see when you preview your tooling. Now, you might want to consider adjusting this to match the results of your particular laser or your laser settings in your material. And then, of course, you can also define a tool number at the very bottom there. Now, if for whatever reason you're unhappy with any of the settings here, you can actually just remove them by clicking this button here. If you've changed any settings, you can apply those by clicking the apply button. If you want to select this tool, you just click select. And if you want to close out the form, you can just close out the form by clicking close. Now, we need to choose a tool for this particular job. Now, in this case, I do want the mark tool because that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to mark the VSquare using this tool. So I'm just going to go ahead and click select. Now you'll notice there's a button here to edit the settings for your tool here. Now, if I click that, you'll notice that it brings up a form, and actually we can edit this for this particular instance of this toolpath. So if I change any settings here, these won't apply to the tool by default. This will only apply to this particular project. So if you ever click that edit button on the right hand side there next to the select button for the tool, that's what it means. It means you can edit the settings for this particular job. But I don't want to do that. I'm happy with the settings, so I'm just going to click cancel. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, we have these three settings that we can change on the fly here. So we've got your power, your move speed, and your number of passes. And you can change that to meet the appropriate settings for your setup. And under that, we have the different types of cut we have here. So you've got cut outside, right, cut inside and left, cut on, and hatch fill. And for this job, we're actually going to choose the cut on option, and that doesn't give us the ability to use any allowance offset or any of the other settings that we've got down here. Now, if I switch that to cut outside right, you'll notice that I do get the option to use the allowance offset. Now, we might use that if we were going to make a part, for example, that needed to fit inside of another part. Then we might want to make some adjustments for that. But in this case, we're going to cut on our grades here. Now I'm just going to pop down and give this a name. I'm going to call this one grades because that is what we're using the toolpath for here. And you'll notice that I actually have the option, as I mentioned earlier, to save the toolpath right now or send it to the machine right now. So you'll notice that here I've got my machine set up as desktop, and I can select the post-processor that is relevant for my machine that I've already set up. Now, this is actually covered in the machine configuration video, and I highly recommend that you watch that so you can learn how to set up your machine so you'll have all the correct posts available to you for when ready for when you come to save off your toolpaths. And I'll make sure to drop that link in the description below on the related videos for you as well. But for now, I'm not going to save it just yet, but I will calculate this toolpath. So let's just hit calculate down here. And then we can have it actually previewing our tooling. So let's preview our selected toolpath. Now, the preview has ran, but you're not seeing any etching. Now, why is that? That actually might be because I've set my kerf a little bit too low. So let's go back into our grades toolpath, and I'm going to edit this for our job setting now. And I'm going to change this kerf from 0.01 to 0.2. Click OK, recalculate my job, and rerun the preview. And this time you can clearly see we have our etched grades. That's much better. So that's just a quick example of why the kerf matters and some of these settings do matter. So I just thought I'd show you an example of that very quickly just there. Now, one great thing you can actually do here while you've got your toolpath selected is you can actually rerun this same toolpath to make this etching darker. So as if you're going over it again with your laser tool. So if I preview that selected toolpath, and with it still selected, if I do it again, you'll notice that the etching is getting darker and darker. So if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see it slowly get darker and darker. And that's a really great tool to have. And similarly, if I just reset this preview, I can show you some of the other changes you can make with our software as well. So if I select my toolpath just here, you'll notice that this is all in light blue currently. So you'll notice that the the grads are represented by a toolpath in light blue. Now, if I go back into my toolpath and I change this power setting here to 75% and then calculate that, you'll notice it's now gone to a much darker blue color. And what it's actually done is it's given you a visual to let you know that you've actually changed the power. And this is great because if you've got multiple laser toolpaths on one project file, this is a great way of knowing which are set to a lower power setting and which are set to a higher power setting, because you can immediately see the change in the color of your actual toolpath that I represented just here. But I'm going to change that back to 30% for this particular project because that's what I need it to be. So I'm just going to click calculate again, reset my preview visible toolpaths. And there we are, there's our grads ready to go, and now we can have a look at some of the other toolpaths. Let's just close out this form. Now what we're going to look at toolpathing next is actually our logo. So let's pop back over to our 2D view, and I'm going to select the Vectric logo. Now you may have noticed that when I clicked on the letter E here, it selected the entire text along with the logo and the underlined line just here. I didn't have to go to my layers tab and select all vectors. And that's because all of the vectors have been grouped together already. So that's quite handy. I didn't have to go to the layers tab and select everything because these are all grouped together. Now, I'm actually going to use the laser cut and fill again. So with that selected, I'm going to choose the laser and cut and fill toolpath. And I'm going to use the same tool, but I will make sure that that kerf is 0.2. So click OK. And this time I'm actually going to use the hatch and fill option. Now you'll notice that's now opened up these settings just here for us. Now the step over is actually the distance between the lines here that's represented in the T logo just here. And the hatch angle, I'm actually going to change this to 45 degrees because I want this to match the angle of the VSquare line just here. And I want the laser to cut that way and give some nice lines. I think it'll look quite nice when it matches the angle of this line just here. Now you'll see that there's an option for outline here. Now all that does is, if you didn't have that on, for example, what you would have is the lines in between the V here, for example, but without the outline of the V itself. So I'm just going to turn that on, and I'm going to give this a name. I'm just going to call it logo, and I'm going to hit calculate. Okay, so let's zoom in onto our toolpath here, and you'll see that you've actually got these blue lines just here. If I just zoom out just a little bit again, there we go. You can see you've got these blue lines here, and that's actually the angle that we set in our form when we were doing the toolpath. Now, if I just go ahead and preview all of our toolpaths here, and there we go. If I zoom back in again, I'll just move this down just a little bit. You'll see there are our lines, and you've got the outline of the letters as well. Now, what I will do is I'll show you what it looks like without the outline, just so you know what it looks like. So if I turn the outline off, calculate, I'm going to reset the preview, and now we can have a look at what it looks like without the outline. And there we go. You can see that. You can see that there's no definitive outline to your letters there. So that's just another option you would like to use. So perhaps in your design you might not want to use an outline. There may be examples where you wouldn't like to use it, but I think I'm going to keep mine in this case. But I also will make sure that I show you what the crosshatch looks like as well. So I'm going to click on crosshatch as well. I'm going to recalculate this as well and reset our preview all toolpaths. And then you can see the crosshatch effect that you've got going on there as well. So it's I actually quite like that a lot more. It's filled it out quite nicely. I'm quite happy about that. So I think that looks quite nice all together with the grades that we've already toolpathed as well. So let's just reset our view, and I'm going to close that down for the moment. So the next thing we're going to do is actually look at cutting out our VSquare. So to do that, let's pop back over to a drawing tab, go to our 2D view, and we're going to look at selecting the layer for our cutout. So if we go up to our layers tab, going to right click on cutout, and we're going to choose the option for select layer vectors, just like we did earlier with the grades. And you can see it's now selected the cutout vectors. And what we can do now is we can pop over to the toolpath menu again. And this time we're going to choose a profile toolpath. I'm going to do some traditional CNC end mill machining on this one. So let's just click on that. Now, I don't want to start depth, but I do want to change the cut depth to be slightly deeper than our material. So I'm going to put Z plus 0.2. So it's going to go just a little bit deeper than our material. The tool I'm actually going to use here is going to be an 1/8 inch end mill. So I'm just going to select, choose the right tool, click on select. Perfect, so I've got my 1/8 inch end mill ready to go. And for this case, in terms of the machine vectors, we're going to go outside of our line. But you know, I'm actually going to edit the passes. I'm going to do it in 5 passes, I think. So I'm just going to put that down to 5 passes. And as I said, machine vectors outside the line. And we're not going to have an allowance offset. We're not going to do a separate last pass. And I'm not going to add any tabs this time because I'm going to use double-sided tape to hold this down to my machine. Now, in your case, you may need to add tabs, perhaps, if you don't have double-sided tape or a vacuum bed. But in my case, I'm going to use some double-sided tape. Don't need any ramps, but I will change the name to Cutout, and I'm going to hit calculate. And now I'm going to get this warning here to let me know that I'll be cutting through the material, and that's okay. I chose that, if you recall, when I set my cut depth over here. So let's just go ahead and click OK. And then of course we can preview our visible toolpath. And there we are. Now we've got our cutouts, and what you can actually do is, you see this material here that we don't need, we can just double click on it to get rid of it. Same with this bit just here, double click, and that is gone. And that is our finished VSquare. So I think that preview looks really good. So now we can have a look at saving our toolpaths. So I'm just going to close out this form for the moment so we can now have a look at saving this off. Okay, so now we can have a look at actually saving off our toolpaths. And to do that, I'm going to make sure I select the toolpaths that I need to use first. So I'm going to save my laser toolpath separately to my cutout because I'm going to use a specific laser post or a laser post processor in this case. So you can see I've checked the box next to my laser toolpaths, and you know the laser toolpaths not only by the names, but also because there's a little image of a laser next to them. And I'm going to come up to here and click on Save Toolpath. And I'm actually going to save these visible toolpaths to multiple files and group where possible. Now, please keep in mind that I have already set up my machine configuration, and I've got it set to the desktop machine here, and I've got the G-code laser arcs inch, which is correct for my machine. Now, if you'd like to learn how to set up your machine configuration so that you can set up your machine so the software knows what machine you're using, and therefore it will download the correct posts for your machine, so that will save you a lot of mistakes and potentially using the wrong posts, I would highly recommend that you watch the related video or the video in the link below on YouTube if you're watching this on YouTube for the machine configuration guide, as well as the saving toolpaths guide, because they are both invaluable in learning about how to set up your machine and also how to save toolpaths. But with that said, I'm happy with that setup, so I'm going to click Save Toolpaths, and I'm actually going to give this a name. I'm going to call this VSquare underscore grads and then underscore logo. So I know it's for my laser grades and logo. And I'm going to go ahead and click Save. Now, if I click Save again, you'll notice it's given me a naming convention where it's put a 1 and a 2 in there, and that means it's giving me toolpath 1 and toolpath 2, so it's going to run the grads first and the logo. So it's always good to know that when you choose this option here, visible toolpaths to multiple files and group where possible, you'll get this. So I'll let you know it's going to do toolpath 1 and then toolpath 2, which is always good to know, but we can cancel that out, and now we can have a look at saving out our cutout toolpath. So let's just hit close, and this time I'm going to deselect my lasers, or my laser toolpaths rather. I'm going to select my cutout toolpath, again pop up to Save Toolpath. Now this time, again, got my machine configuration already set up, and I've got my G-code inch post, which is right for my machine and right for my setup. So I'm going to go ahead and save this toolpath, and I'm actually going to cancel that for a moment because I don't need to save multiple toolpaths to one file here. I've only got the one toolpath, so make sure I've got a selected toolpath. Click on Save again, call this one Cutout, click on Save, and if I click on Save again, there we are. You can see there's my cutout toolpath ready to go to the machine. And with that, that concludes our tutorial. So I hope you have found this very, very useful, and I hope that when it comes to making some of your own laser toolpaths, that you find this guide very useful, and I hope you have a lot of fun trying this one out yourself. And as usual, we always appreciate your time and we look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much.